Self-defense tips from a damaged man. Well, this is the first video, so let's get into some background, try to establish some credentials. People are not very trusting out there, so even though you might bring the wisdom, bring the goods, people just still want to know your story. So I'm not going to give my whole story, but I'll give what I believe to be key parts. So as a damaged man, when does it actually start? When does it happen? The truth is, it very rarely starts when a man is a man. It almost always starts when he's a child. In most cases, it's literally starting right out the gate from birth. So what do I mean by that? You mean, how is a person getting damaged from birth? Well, obviously it's their parents, right? Mainly the father. So it's a cycle. So it happened to him, and maybe happened to him. So for me, when I started getting some information about my dad and why he, acted and treated us the way he did, then you kind of found out that his father was really hard and harsh on him. I couldn't really get a lot of information about my great-grandfather, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was just rinse and repeat. That was just part of the cycle that was going on. So praise God that the mercy and grace of God broke that cycle in my life. So I'm no longer a damaged man, but I learned a lot of lessons going through that process before I submitted, repented, and give my life to the Lord, that I could be reconciled to God. So I don't want this to be, freaking people out. We're like, oh, this guy's crazy. I think I'm sane. I think I'm sane now. But that would be up for debate, right? So let's get into it. So cycle starts when you're essentially born. So you've got a man that there's different reasons, right? So you can have a father who is very broken and very aggressive, which was my case, but it's not always like that. Sometimes it's just hearing parents argue a lot. Sometimes it's a father who's not present. Sometimes it's a father who just has just give up. His wife kind of is the aggressive one, and he just has no resistance. So young men get to see that. They grow up, and it's very damaging. Lots of serial killers had mom issues. And when you kind of read about some of these serial killers, it's because there either was no dad in the home, or the dad was just checked out. He was super weak in the relationship. And these men developed actually a hatred for women. So that's something that's real. The psychology is really, I think, well established, that it's rare that you'll get a man that will break in such a psychotic way as an adult that hasn't had some significant history as a child. So for me, parents were burnt out of their house. I grew up in Belfast. Parents were burnt out of their house in Belfast in 1969 for being Irish Catholic. My sister died 2 weeks later. My dad just kind of, whatever anger and aggression that was already in him sort of got challenged against the British forces, and just a slippery slope, just a path to just the evil and depression and addiction and just all these things that come with brokenness. So, unfortunately, he would overreact in situations with us, and beat us very severely as children. And as you grow up as a child, you don't have the ability to process this. You just have to survive. You go into survival mode, and because you go into survival mode and you bury a certain amount of stuff just to survive, the problem is this stuff doesn't pop up again until later on, and a lot of times until you're actually in a relationship yourself. That you're in a significant relationship is when a lot of this stuff starts to come out. And so sometimes it can even be surprising to you as a person, because you just had done a good job of not dealing with it. But now, hey, here you are, you're married, and all this stuff starts to come out, this anger, and a lot of times you don't even know where it's coming from. Like, what is this, the seed of this? What's the origin of this? And if you're one of those men, it's because, something happened to you as a kid, and you need to, in my opinion, seek some form of counseling. I highly recommend Christian counseling, but you need to seek some form of counseling to help address these issues, because they don't go away by themselves. Just because a person is like, I surrender, I give my life to the Lord out of an act of complete surrender and brokenness, And it says that, you know, God will console the brokenhearted, like he will come and be with us, the broken spirited, so and build us back up. But it doesn't mean that we haven't that we've actually addressed the issues. So we haven't really fixed all of our history. We've just kind of dealt with something in our present. And a lot of times, in order to move forward, we need to really go back and deal with the past. So I highly recommend it. Seek counseling, reach out to people. If you have any kind of, you know, self-harm thoughts or anything like that, absolutely get help, because that is not of God. That is, in my opinion, those are demonic attacks, and they're not of you. God loves you. You are absolutely precious to him, and he would never ever put that thought in your head, and it would break his heart that you even think about that, let alone would do it. So just you know, just seek help and try to get some people surrounding you that are blessing you, that are leaning into you and helping you through your difficult situation. So kind of hard to talk about this subject without that, because if there's any other man out there listening that kind of can relate to what I'm saying, you know, you guys know what I'm talking about. You know, I mean, some women, most of my videos are made primarily for men, but, you know, you can pass the word along, or if there's any women watching, you know, absolutely, you know, whatever you can glean from it. Leave a comment and let me know, you know, subscribe. It really helps get this message out. So if you feel like this is a good message and important, you know, please subscribe and share the video. So, you know, my dad was a boxer in the Merchant Navy. So from a very young age, he would make me and my brother box. So of course, you know, when you're boxing from like 5-6 years old, you know, your older brother, the bottom line is that everything then is dealt with violence. Like that's just how you deal with things. You just basically lift your fists and start smacking. You know, there's no de-escalation taught. There's no compromise. You know, my father never taught us that. You know, we got to witness him beat other men, get into fights with British soldiers. I mean, just super violent guy. So there was no training that a man would need. And it took me years to unpack this. And to be quite honest, it was only really recently, within the last 2-3 years, where I had a significant victory of understanding what was going on. I wasn't really an aggressive person. There's a lot of men out there, and they become very aggressive. But it's the same thing, the same underlying fear that I felt, that I believe it's in them. They're trying to compensate. So they're trying to compensate for that fear, because they're literally terrified that other men will see the fear. You know, so you get these guys, you know, they'll go to the gym, they'll go and learn some kind of a martial art or fighting. You know, I spent a short time boxing, but then I got into freestyle kickboxing, and we'd fight competitively in Ireland. And that's just such a huge trait of broken man, is to kind of go down that path. You know, spent a short stint in the military. And, you know, so a lot of broken men, like, this is a path that they often go, because in many ways we're looking for leadership. We want leadership. Like, we want someone to help us, but we don't have the wisdom and maturity to just ask for it at the time. So, and you may be asking, what has this got to do with self-defense? I'm getting there. Just bear with me, you know. So I do believe that this video will bear fruit, and it might, you know, it might be more than one video, but I believe that it will bear fruit. So if you're patient and just give me the time. So we kind of solved everything, you know, with our fists, and that was out of fear. So much of that was out of fear, that we were worried about being challenged. And, you know, it's like Roosevelt said, you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, you know. And for me, that absolutely was the motivator. I'm a short guy, so I everybody was taller, essentially, right? So it wasn't the height or the size of the man that would put me in fear. It was the submission. It was being overcome. It was being defenseless. It was being helpless. That fear of being helpless, you know, the helplessness from my childhood would cause me and allow me to overcome any fear that I would have of the person physically, so that I would have, in many ways, no problem engaging, and in the rare case, and even kind of make it happen, because I just didn't want there to be any doubt that I was afraid. But what I want to explain is that I was afraid. And the breakthrough that I had a few years ago, that I had been in denial of my whole life, was that I am afraid of men. I'm afraid of men. I was beaten by a man at a very young age. Seen my brother get beat, and I grew up in West Belfast during essentially a guerrilla-style civil war, just fighting at school all the time, fighting on the street, just surrounded with fear, and that fear just kept pushing me into scenarios that I didn't need to be in, that I could have de-escalated, that I could have probably figured out some way to get out of. And even having that confidence, especially when I started to learn to fight and compete, and knew that my skill set allowed me to be more capable than the average man, no matter what size he was, I still didn't have that peace of mind. I still didn't have the ability to de-escalate a situation and to be able to walk away, or even just talk it out. Not every disagreement has to end up in a physical confrontation. A lot of them, especially as I've learned here in America, a lot of men here will say a lot. There's a lot of talkers over here, and they'll talk. There's obviously a lot of strong, healthy, tough men over here as well, but it's not really what I would consider like the average person. I would consider the average person over here, especially in the white community, I would consider them to be, kind of, well, let's say non-confrontational, right? Physically non-confrontational. So they verbalize a lot, but then when it comes to the point of it becoming physical, they usually are not interested in the physical part, the physical aspect. Maybe a wee bit more when there's alcohol involved, but when there's no alcohol involved, they don't really want any part of it. So when you go into tougher communities, it's different. People can tend to be more aggressive, but that's because in many ways you'll find more brokenness in economically challenged areas. It's just a sad, unfortunate truth, but it's been my observation of what I see happening in society. And I come from one of those. I come from one of those economically challenged areas. It would be equivalent to an American project, where it was just really a housing complex built for single moms, called Polglass. And the whole housing complex essentially was built for single moms. And people used to make a joke, what's the height of confusion? People would say Father's Day and Polglass. So, Irish people seem to love cruel jokes, but they're actually kind of funny. But I want to kind of start talking about engaging with broken men, and if there's anyone out there that wants to reach out and talk, I'm willing. Like I'm available. I'm willing. Obviously you can see the high vis right now, so as soon as I get done with this video, I got to go to work, so I can't always talk, but I will do my best to get back to you in a timely fashion. And I'd love to try to help you. I'd love to try to share with you what I went through, my journey, and how God healed me, how he started the process and has continued to heal me, and just making me a man that when I look in the mirror, I'm like, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Like this is a solid journey, and this path that God has blessed me with is awesome. Just awesome to know that there's healing and hope and just a future, that I've always dreamed and wanted of, and I believe that that's available to every man listening to this video. That hope, that future is available to you. And please believe it. It's real. It is. God is. He specializes in broken men. Specializes in broken men. It's his specialty in putting us back together again. And no matter how broken you think you are, no matter how broken I thought I was, there's other men out there more broken than me. There's other men out there that I hear their stories, and I'm literally like thankful for my background, that I didn't go through that. So God heals them all the time. So trust me, is you might think you're complicated. You're really not. As man, we're really not that complicated. We're actually pretty simple creatures. God knows how to fix us. He knows how to put us together and then put people around us to help us. So anyway, one of the things that I would engage in growing up is when I lived in Poglass, there was two stores, one right close to our house and then one also close but just a wee bit further away. And one would close, the one close to our house would close a bit earlier than the other one. So sometimes if we wanted some things, I'd have to go over to the other store. It'd be night, 9 o'clock at night or whatever the case is. I go to get milk and eggs. And, Belfast, where I kind of grew up, it's very much an area where youth hang out, in corners, at stores, they'll drink, they'll be smoking, they're just congregating there. And that's just our culture, right? It's just a culture of just congregating on the streets. So you go over there and you walk up and I'd have this fear. It would get into the pit of my stomach. It was just horrendous growing up where I grew up, because you just were constantly in fear because of how many young men, how many just what's the best way to say this? Like, untrained. Young men who felt unloved. I'm not saying that they were unloved, because moms are great, they do an amazing job. But when you don't have a dad in your life, women can't raise men. They can raise boys and nurture boys, but they can't raise men. Only a man can raise men, in my opinion. I know there's some women out there doing amazing jobs, but still, in my opinion, I just believe that only man can raise man. So I'd be going over, there'd be other kids similar to me, probably similar backgrounds, and mom has, 3 or 4 kids, 3 or 4 different dads. None of them feel loved, none of them feel special, and they all congregate together, and, there's just this jockeying for whoever the alpha is and all this kind of stuff. So of course, hey, I'm a new guy, right? Or I don't really go over here that often. So I'd walk up to the store and there'd be like a few of them standing out front of the store. So for me, it was like the eye contact. Broken man, so much of our triggering system is about eye contact. So you can make eye contact with the person, but if that eye contact is considered too long, then it's a challenge. So now it's a challenge. So I'd walk up and I wanted to make sure that I didn't appear as prey. So I'd make the eye contact, and somebody would make the eye contact with me. And then if, it lingered a little bit too long, because it's almost a stare down at that point, as you're walking closer, they're just looking at you, you're looking back, because I'm afraid. I don't want to fight. I definitely don't want to get into a fight with 5 or 6 kids. That's not a fight I can win. So I didn't want to do it, but I had too much fear that would not allow me to disengage, because as my brain is doing the equation as I walk up there, I'm like, it is much better that I could beat up by these 5, 6 kids than they think that I'm weak, that they think I'm prey, that they think I'm helpless. So that's the thought process going on in my head that would allow me to override the self-preservation instinct. So of course I would get into fights with these kids. I'd come home, missing a shoe, missing a shirt, blood all over my shirt, 1 egg survived, if I was able to make it home with any of the food, 1 egg survived, the 4 rounds of bread, whatever, that would happen, it just was a horrible situation. And I'm saying this because I know that there's a lot of men absolutely can relate to what I'm saying. For those of you who can't relate to what I'm saying, praise God. That is truly amazing that you had loving people in your life to give you that support, where you didn't feel that level of insecurity and helplessness. And even for my own children, I don't recognize any of my helplessness that I carried as a child in them. I don't see them carrying any of that. So still highly advisable for young men to learn how to defend themselves. Couldn't advise it any higher, even young women, to learn how to defend themselves. So what I'm going to talk about today is I'm just going to keep talking about this eye contact. I teach a course called Urban Survival for Christians. So my YouTube channel here is Christian Preppers, at Christian Preppers on YouTube. But I teach an in-person course called Urban Survival for Christians. So one of the parts that I talk about in an urban survival situation, or which honestly right now, these are skills that you can use every day. So these are not just the crap hitting the fan, some significant event type scenario. These are skills that you can use right now because there's broken men around right now. So you don't have to wait. That doesn't have to be an end of civilization type scenario to use these things, use these skills. These are skills that could really help you de-escalate and avoid a very, very risky situation right now. So eye contact. It is a challenge to a broken man. If you are not a broken man or broken woman, you cannot understand or relate to what's going on inside that guy's head. So when I teach the urban survival course and I get to the self-defense portion, which, for me, it's de-escalate, de-escalate, de-escalate. Whatever you can do to de-escalate, that is absolutely your most successful option. So you're going to have the greatest likelihood of success and evasion or just getting home safe without any issues if you can learn how to de-escalate. So engagement is literally an absolutely last case scenario. It's a last case scenario. When, it's like when I was a lifeguard, they would tell you, they would train you to get in the water and rescue a person. You'd have to go to the bottom and bring the body to the surface and do CPR at the edge of the pool and all that stuff. But whenever you're doing the training, they make it so clear. You throw a life ring, you grab a pole, a long stick, you use your clothing to make some form of a rudimentary rope or whatever the case is. Like, you use everything and anything you can to not get in the water. And even when you do get in the water, you don't dive in. You got to jump in with your feet, assuming that every body of water that you jump into has something dangerous at the bottom and it's shallow. So even when you engage, there's a way to do it, and that's what I'm going to try to talk about. But in this video, I just really want to emphasize the eye contact, because the eye contact, understanding the eye contact, will help you de-escalate so many problems. It's going to be incredible how eye contact will help you de-escalate so many problems. So, you pull up to a store. This is something that actually happened to me. So I pulled up to a store and there was like a box truck doing deliveries, and the box truck was right at the front door. And I could see that he was kind of getting ready, putting his ramp, putting the door up. I was talking on the phone, so I pull into my truck. So I'm finishing my phone conversation. It's like, I don't know, maybe like 10 o'clock at night. And so by the time I'm done with my phone conversation, I get out of the truck and I'm just simply asking my wife at home, like, hey, I'm going to pop into 7-Eleven or something like that. Is there anything you want here from the store before I get home? She's kind of like saying no. So I get out of the truck. As I get out of the truck and close the door, the box van is pulling out. And as the box van pulls out, I realize there's like 5 or 6 guys standing there right at the front door. And as the box truck pulls away, it's almost like I startled them and they kind of startled me. So we kind of made really solid eye contact. So we're kind of like looking at each other and sizing each other up. So what I had kind of trained myself and learned to do was to actually say something. Don't just look and then act afraid. Actually engage. So I just said, hey, what's up, guys? And 1 or 2 of them, said, oh, yeah, good, you, whatever, and we were of different ethnicities. So, of course, you've got that thing going on. So, so there was this sizing up. But whenever I said that, I think it helped relieve from them that I'm not a threat. I'm not making the eye contact in a threatening way. And even though 1 or 2 of them did keep looking at me and didn't say anything, there was enough of a neutrality in the group where I went in, did my shopping, came back out, said, hey, good night, guys. And then got in my truck and drove away. And 1 or 2 of them even said, yeah, you too, or whatever, as I was leaving. So that was a way that I feel like that could have went sideways. Had it been the old me, and I wasn't willing to say something, say something that had like an affirmative, even just a neutral tone. But saying hi guys, that's polite. Because here's the truth is, a lot of these men, they don't feel good about themselves. And one of the reasons why they don't feel good about themselves is it's in many ways it's actually reinforced. Society reinforces this stereotype onto them. I felt it so many times growing up in Belfast. Especially if I was in a British area. I mean, you feel like, we can tell each other apart. We all, to an outsider, we all look the same, but we can tell each other apart for the most part. So you'd be in an area, they look at me, they know what's going on, and you feel that aggression. Like they think that you're scum. Like they think you're a scumbag. And you feel that aggression. And when I would walk home, when I lived in Poglas, I'd have to pass this little British enclave right in front of a police station, and they would just stand there in gangs, and all they would do is shout slurs and curse at you, and they'd want to goad you into a fight, and stuff like that there. So you would feel this somewhat on a common basis, that there's literally hatred directed towards you, even though they don't know you. These dudes never met you before. Maybe you actually hung out for a bit, you'd be like best friends. But they hated the label. They hated my label as an Irish Catholic. Hated it. It didn't matter who I was. That's all they needed to know was I was Irish Catholic, and that was all they needed to hate me. A lot of these men feel that. They feel that society also kind of treats them. They don't really feel love for themselves. They've never really been taught how to love themselves. They've never been taught that other people really love and value them. So whenever you're a member of society and you kind of affirm that, you're going to bring up this trauma. You're going to bring up this past. And now these guys have got to make a statement. They've got to have a response, because as all men start to get older and feel, we won't no longer be defenseless. We're not going to live in that defenseless posture anymore. We in many ways, we don't care if it costs us our life. We're not going to live in that state. We are absolutely not going to be defenseless, not for one more minute in our lives, even if it puts us in these absolutely stupid situations. So if you're finding yourself engaging in a scenario, and I kind of started earlier, but I didn't finish. When I have some of these people in the classes, especially women, and they go to these self-defense instructors, and these self-defense instructors are kind of teaching them self-defense, and they're teaching them, make strong eye contact. You make strong eye contact because you're not a victim. That's what strong eye contact says, is you're not a victim. Now, I want to explain to you, this is insane. This is insane to tell a woman to make strong eye contact with a broken, damaged man and try to relay the message that you're not prey, that you're not a victim. Listen, you don't understand. That broken, damaged man that you are essentially challenging with your strong eye contact, that guy is probably willing to die to defend that he's not afraid. So you're challenging someone that is so broken, so devoid of rational thought processes, that his only sort of feeling in that situation is, I gotta prove I'm not helpless. Does any of this make sense? Of course not. They're broken. I was broken. It doesn't make, when I look back on it right now, the man I am now, that God has redeemed, to the man that I used to be, it's two different human beings. When the Bible says that you're a new creation in the Lord, it's like, that is not like just hyperbole. It's not just, suggestive. It's, for me, it was literal, and so many other men that I know, it's literal. I am literally a different human being than what I was back there. So you can't rationalize a broken man. So when you've got these guys and training, and this is the first thing I wanna sort of explain, and maybe this is a long video, because I've got a lot to say on this. But I did a survey for my course. I started asking some friends who are cops, and I started reaching out and asking, how do you handle self-defense situations when you're in uniform as opposed to when you're out of uniform? So what I started doing is, after I started getting so many answers coming in, I started calling the uniform the Batman suit, because I kept finding, from a personification, sort of viewpoint, that whenever a police officer, a soldier, or anybody who wears a uniform in a security type situation, it was like kind of putting on the Batman suit. It was like you literally put on a persona. So when you're wearing uniform, you tended to be the aggressor. You're going up to these guys asking them, hey, what's going on? You're the one that has to apprehend them. You're the one that's actually being proactive in the situation. But here's what's funny is, these same men that I spoke to, and I asked them, have you ever been in a situation out of uniform? Every single one of them said yes, that they had had some form of a situation. The way that they responded was literally the opposite. They went into a de-escalatory posture, where they were getting their wife and their kids. The one guy in particular that I spoke to, who was a weapons instructor, he got his wife and kids behind him in a department store, and he kind of got behind a clothing rack. When he seen a guy, he made strong eye contact with the guy that he had previously arrested, who obviously now was released. And they made strong eye contact in the store, and he understood this is a threat. Had he been in uniform, he would have went to the guy. But because he's out of uniform, he actually starts to retreat. So he gets his wife and children safe, and he's just basically in a defensive posture. If this guy comes, okay, I'm ready, but I'm not going to escalate this at all. I'm going to do everything I can by conceding ground, by backing up, to try to de-escalate the situation, because the potential risk, the threat assessment, the risk is too great. The risk of one of your family members getting hurt is too great in this scenario. So de-escalation is the process. So here's the part that just really bothers me a lot, is these guys in uniforms, or these guys that are teaching these self-defense courses, because I keep hearing the same thing again and again and again. Strong eye contact. You're not a victim. You got to make sure you let them know you're not a victim. Listen, if you're not very, very skilled in knowing how to do this with broken men, then they are going to receive it as a challenge. And it's now a self-fulfilling prophecy, that you're now looking at a guy and thinking that he's going to attack you. Well, the way that you treat him is almost guaranteeing that he will attack you. And it's not to act aggressive. It is not to act aggressive. I really hope that I've been able to make this point. I have other videos that I'm going to make on eye contact. So for instance, like if you drive into a rat and you're in your car, eye contact is so unbelievably important in what is a minimal stress situation or a low stress situation, that through your eye contact, you can literally now escalate into a high stress situation. And when you put broken people under high stress, or their buddies are like sitting saying to them, hey, did you see the way he looked at you? Like, this guy now is being called out by his friends. He almost has to say something to you. So for you just to look at them, not allow the look to be too long, but have a certain sense of confidence, and say something. Say, hey, how's it going tonight, guys? I'm not saying that you need to stand and engage. I would highly recommend against that. What I would recommend is you be polite, you be pleasant, you go in, you get what you came for. You keep observing. Like, are they moving? Are they moving towards your vehicle? So now your exit is blocked. So you can be walking around the store and observing things. And react. If it's like, hey, you get another phone call. So you just got to hang out there on the phone for a minute. If you feel like you're surely at risk, call the police. Call the police and just say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but there's a crowd. I feel at risk. Is there any way a police officer could just pull into the parking lot? I don't know if I need anything more than that. I don't know if I need you to even say anything to them, but if there's any possibility the police officer could just pull into the parking lot as I exit the store. it doesn't have to be like this overly confrontational situation. So constantly observing, constantly doing your threat assessment, trying to understand, am I at risk here? And here's what I would tell you. Trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. Now, here's part of the problem in saying that. Some people have drowned out their instincts with fear. So they might think, well, this is my instinct telling me this. But really what it is, it's your paranoia. It's your fear that's telling you, I'm in danger. I'm in danger. I've got to look at them. You know, I can't be prey or whatever the case is. Try to learn how to breathe. You know, I've got one of these videos. I teach people, you know, how to breathe in this. You know, how to breathe, how to de-escalate, how to calm your own body down to prevent any physiological responses that would cause fight, flight, or fear. Those are your enemy. What you need is proper thought processes, an OODA loop cycle. You need to be able to observe and discern. You need to be able to look at what's going on and keep doing your threat assessment. And there's no shame. There's no shame in just trying to coordinate something. You know, just if somebody else pulls into the parking lot, if something else is going on, there's no shame in that. So let me know what you think about this eye contact situation. Like I said, when I was younger and I was broken, it was a challenge. And it might have been the last thing that was on my mind was getting into a physical confrontation. But I felt like this dude just slapped me in the face with a gauntlet. So I have to respond. And if I don't respond, everybody is going to know that I'm afraid of men. And then I will be back to being helpless like I was as a child. So let me know your thoughts. Please share this video. If you know men that are suffering with anger issues or frustration, or you just think that this could help them in some way, please share it with them. But because I would love the opportunity to be able to share with those men what helped me, how God fixed me, how He blessed me, you know, and that process is still going on. But it's a beautiful process to know that I'm loved the way that He loves me. Please help me get this out. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe.